Phil, long-time listener, first-time caller. Great to have you here. Thank you for participating in this, and really looking forward to tonight's event. When you and I were chatting, I came up with this idea, and hopefully it sounds like something that we can drive some value out of for you as well. But you write a ton of content, and I would call them nuggets of wisdom that you deploy, and gets tremendous support through social media, sometimes a little controversial conversation amongst it. But what I thought we could do is cover some of the most recent content that you have released and talked about. And two that really jumped out at me were a topic people probably are getting tired of talking about, which is zero trust. Just bringing it back to home base, I think, was what you did real well there. And the second one is a job description for a CISO. And so why don't we reverse that order? One of the quotes from the conversation that you brought forth around describing the CISO role, this job description, one of the quotes that got a lot of attention is, you should run towards problems and reach for accountability. This one got a lot of likes, comments, a lot, and I think mostly positive. But why do you think that is right now in the industry? And I'd be very curious, given your tenure in security, is there an example or two that really jumped out? Maybe you did it, or somebody on your team that exemplified that particular trait?
Well, so I think it's funny. It's like a fine line, because I think sometimes there's and neither are wrong. So there's an ethos in the CISO community that the job of the CISO is to manage risk, and business unit CIOs or CTOs or the business, they're accountable for the risk and they should do something about it. And that's kind of true. But at the same time, the CISO can't just go, there's a risk. You know, the business unit might want to accept that risk and not do something about it. And the CISO can't just kind of walk away from there. The CISO's got to have some skin in the game and have some kind of moral courage to challenge it. Now, there's a limit to what you can do. So, you know, there might be an organization really does need to take a bit more risk than the CISO's comfortable with for business purposes. But generally speaking, I think the successful CISOs are people that work alongside their peer C-suite executives and just feel a personal, visceral accountability for protecting the business and driving the mission. And that's that kind of reach for accountability phrase. And I kind of, you know, my role before Google, I was at Goldman Sachs for a long time, and the Goldman Sachs culture was very much kind of reach for accountability and like own problems and work with each other. And one of the things that characterizes many great organizations, and you'll know this in your business, if something's going wrong, or if there's a problem with a customer, or if there's an issue, you can test an organization by how many people are fighting to try and fix that problem. Weaker organizations, you can see it by how many people are running away from the problem and not wanting to take ownership. And I think that's a culture that's important for CISOs. And when business units see the CISO like running towards a problem, looking to help, reaching for accountability, there's a degree of trust there in kind of wartime that's also useful in peacetime.
It's interesting you use the word culture. So I felt like the post had a lot of cultural elements to it, and it started to get me to think about whether or not there's a lot of conversation around what's happening to the CISO role. How are businesses of various kinds looking at the CISO role? How critical is it? Can you have a CIO and a CISO role combined? And it seems like there is a company culture that almost needs to support this dynamic. What are you seeing out there or hearing from the folks you mentor or your peers about the dynamics for the CISO role? Right. And how applicable is that job description now?
It's interesting, and there seems to be kind of two paths people are going. There's a group of CISOs that have become CIOs and CTOs, or they're becoming CISOs and holding the CTO or CI role at the same time. And it's almost a sense of what's happening in some businesses where the CISO is rightly pointing out problems in infrastructure, where the right approach to secure the organization is to upgrade infrastructure to create a more defendable environment. And then the board or the CEO has turned around and gone, okay, you run infrastructure, then you fix it, you upgrade. And that's actually not unhealthy. It's probably good in some organizations. Now, there's a different track of organizations, and we're seeing this with AI deployments everywhere, where the CISOs are really working with their businesses to help deploy AI in secure ways in support of their business. But then what happens, especially for organizations that don't have big compliance, risk, privacy, trust and safety teams, those businesses are turning around to the CISO and basically saying, who's looking after privacy, who's looking after compliance, who's looking after responsible AI, who's looking after biases and ethics. And the CISO's going like, I guess it's me. And they're almost then, because of that, becoming the chief digital risk officer.
Interesting.
And so there's a whole bunch of people. Now I meet with CISOs a lot in both my current and prior life, and they're becoming like the chief risk officers for their organizations as their organizations are digitized and more of the risks are inherently digital. The CISOs are coming to the fore as one of the most senior risk people in an entire organization. It's a little bit different in some organizations that have already got chief risk officers like big banks, but a lot of the other organizations that don't have that structure, the CISO is filling that vacuum, and that's great as well.
What do you think the hot take is then on where the CISO role is and where it's going? Could apply to this post that you did or this blog you did, but what do you think your hot take on the direction of the CISO role?
Yeah, I think it's mostly, it's all about, and I think it's always been like this, but it's never been more so. It's mission centric. It's like, what is the mission of the organization? What's the commercial objective, and how can the CISO support that? Now, of course, not just supporting it by forgetting about all the risk. This is about, in the blog post, to talk about kind of, focusing on the commercial outcomes, ensuring the business has freedom to operate in the way it wants to operate without being fearful of things going wrong. And that's a commercial enablement thing. And so I think CISOs want the seat at the table with their peer business executives, and the way to get and sustain that is by being equally vested in the commercial outcomes and making sure that they're doing that in a secure, reliable, and safe way.
Yeah. Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit on topics. Let's bring back to life Zero Trust and the conversation in a sane way. There are a lot of different takes, certainly many created by vendors. I was just kind of curious, what drove you to bring this topic back into the fold, back into the security sphere, if you will?
Well, yeah, I think most CISOs are quite frustrated with the phrase zero trust. It's like become a marketing term, and it's kind of lost all meaning. And so it was interesting, I kind of worked at Google for a long time. The concept of Beyond Corp, which was arguably the thing, along with a thing actually in the UK called the Jericho Forum, which probably predated Beyond Corp, were the two things that started this zero trust movement.
And Aurora was the big driver for that initially, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and so, and then, John, wherever he was at the time, kind of coined the term zero trust.
Oh, Kindervag.
Coined the term zero, and then after that, it kind of morphed into meaning many things. But ultimately, it's literally what it says on the tin, which is make no explicit assumptions, constantly validate and not take any trust for granted. I think sometimes zero trust means you have no trust. I think what means you have no implicit trust. You've got to constantly verify and validate. And some of the organizations that have embraced this, of course, the one I'm closest to recently is Google, where have just literally every authentication is a strong cryptographic phishing resistant authentication. Machines are validated. Everything is least privilege. Every time some machine and person access something, the privilege is authenticated and rechecked for whether that authorization is right. It's a combination of access decisions and a whole array of other things, not just people to machines, but machines to machines. And it's highly effective, but it's not one solution. It's not one little package or device you deploy. It's an architectural framework, and implementing and achieving zero trust in a Kubernetes cluster versus a desktop login versus a browser login versus a traditional infrastructure. They're all different components and different things. And there are some solutions that span a lot of it, but I don't know of any one product that delivers zero trust into an enterprise. And I don't think it ever will be. It's an architectural concept, not a product.
So you're telling me if we just slap Z on our product, it's not going to make it so? Okay, all right, just checking. I mean,
But look, it's interesting in your business is, what you guys do in terms of helping organizations understand what security components are where, delivering what value, and does it match the risk profile and threat profile of an organization. That's the right approach to think about this. It's an orchestration of tools to meet commercial and risk management objectives, and collectively you can do this.
And I think that's actually takes me to something you wrote about. We're going to go in the Wayback Machine for a second.
Right.
And a term you coined, which was Pareto metrics. And the relationship for that was going from an artisanal style to I think you're for industrial style. Is that correct? Okay, industrial style. And I thought, going back and reading that and comparing it to the zero trust conversation, I think there's a lot of parallels to the two. Can you think of Pareto metrics or things that really need to be focused on when you're either starting to engage the zero trust conversation and start to roll it out, or look at it and observe it over time for its effectiveness?
Well, the reason I kind of call them Pareto metrics is it's how do you measure the 20% of things that get you 80% of the outcome? And I think in most organizations, when you look at this, there's an 80-20 in everywhere. And so some of the 20% of things that get you 80% of the way on your zero trust journey is strong multi-factor authentication for people. It's least privilege in certain parts of your production environment. It's having a repeatable software production environment so that you know what you're running in production came out of your software delivery pipeline. It's a whole array of things like that, and you don't need to do everything everywhere. There is, if you're going to get 100%, you need to do everything everywhere, but you can get 80% by doing 20% of the controls. Now, 20% of the controls, they're still hard to do. It's not easy rolling out like strong phishing resistant authentication pervasively across a large organization. But when you do it and you've got it done, you take so much risk off the table, and it's the same thing with a few other controls.
Well, I appreciate the shout out of what we do here. I think the words you used, which aligns to, say, CISO's model, for example, with orchestration, they have that beautiful blue bar that crosses all their pillars, and orchestration and automation is one component of that. And I think that brings me to the point where I ask, and I'm going to ask it, and I might regret it, but you let me know. It feels like AI does have a role here in being able to help folks. That's a perfect place to understand data, understand the uniqueness of an environment, and tailor controls to get to that 20%. But were you exploring that, or do you see value in AI helping maybe solve some of these more architectural to implementation challenges that companies face?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think adversaries are going to keep using AI for their own purposes, just like all of us do. But I think there's a fundamental balance where AI delivers a structural advantage to defenders, because defenders have the context, defenders have their own fine-tuning data, defenders have the ability to integrate AI in the right places. And certainly, and I think we've also got to move beyond just the naive use of like a chatbot. I think there's more to AI than just sitting down at Gemini or ChatGPT or Claude. Is symbolic AI, there's traditional machine learning, there's large language models, there's multimodal models. And when you see successful companies and successful vendors using AI, they're using a collection of AI to reimagine how to do something. And I think when you look at some of the problems of analyzing an environment, recommending a configuration, understanding what the most problematic thing is, it's surprising how much AI can help with that. I don't think at this stage, for at least many parts of security, it's fully usable to do full automation, but it's a 10x productivity amplification for security engineers who are trying to drive change, and that's often a big game changer for most organizations.
Yeah, we play this kind of game of sorts with our customers or prospects, and as we show a workflow, we say, how many minutes do you think it would take to do this or look this up or do this? Kind of the traditional automation use case, right?
Yeah.
And then it's the multiplication of, or the exponential growth of how many times you'd have to do that. And expertise on top of that as well.
But again, it's funny. I think people are underappreciating how many places this stuff is. So, like, again, I'll speak about Google. I mean, I'm sure Amazon do the same thing, but I know Google is integrating generative AI into products so that when you want to set up a new database, a new Kubernetes cluster, a new environment, you're actually having the AI work with you to generate the configuration, and generate the configuration in a secure by default way, which not only improves the productivity of spinning up an environment, it also makes sure it's less likely to have reliability, security, or other types of errors in it when you've done the spin up. Yeah,
you actually, on that topic of the tools, many types of models, many places, you have a reference on this topic around many tools to assist in the battlefield. You got a really awesome picture of a tank, by the way. I don't know how you picked it out, but it was very cool. Nerding out there for a second. But I mean, what is the risk of not going down the path of looking at solving this problem with many tools.
Right.
Or having a common kind of doctrine across those, I suppose, is also another way to think about it. Like many tools, many things that could be done. How do you unify the overall
that's
mission?
right. I think you've got to understand, be prepared to change your tools regularly and use the tools for the most appropriate purpose. And I think that's kind of, everybody would absolutely agree with that. But then they go about their day job and try and jam everything into an LLM because that's the latest technology. But in many respects, some of the traditional deep learning approaches, or even some of rule-based things, are probably the best thing for certain problems. And again, we see this, forgetting about security, we see this in businesses that are deploying AI to automate and improve their business processes, their customer interactions, their supply chain management, their manufacturing management. They're not just using a single model, they're using multiple models, they're using symbolic AI, they're using deep learning, they're using rule-based systems. And the really talented IT teams and business teams and security teams, they're really great at assembling things to deliver an outstanding objective, not just putting a wrapper around a standard LLM.
It takes a little bit of acknowledgement of ego and a lot of pragmatism, but it's the most effective outcome.
Yeah, exactly.
And we're here in Silicon Valley and we like to chase the next shiny thing, but it's not always that's going to help get the job done.
That's right.
Okay, so last question, this is a surprise for you. Do you want to leak the next topic that you are going to be writing about or talking about to get people a little excited about what's coming next? We just covered the last couple and I jumped all the way to 2023.
So the next post, it might not be the absolute, but the next one coming up that might be a bit, might cause some controversy, especially to like you in the vendor community, is I'm going to do like the 7 deadly sins of teams and how they work with vendors. So like greed, I have to buy all the products, sloth, I'm never going to change products. And so, you may or may not be upset with the 7 deadly sins of security products.
Okay, well, thank you for that. That's awesome, Phil. Thank you for the time today and really appreciate making it out.
Yeah, it's great to be working with you guys as well.
Thank you. So Phil, can you go ahead and introduce yourself? I'm sure everybody knows who you are, but maybe a little bit about what you're doing now.
Yeah. So I'm Phil Venables. I've been a long-time CISO and Chief Risk Officer at various organizations. Spent the past few years at Google Cloud as their CISO and a few other things for Google. Really happy now to be a partner at Ballistic Ventures, and I get to do great work with a lot of our portfolio companies like Reach Security. And so it's great to be in this new world of not just investing in new things, but helping the companies we've already invested in reach new levels of success.
Team Ballistic. All right, perfect, Phil. Thank you.
All right, thanks.